With the opening of COP21 in Paris, climate change is at the heart of international debate. Euronews took the occasion to speak to President of the World Bank, Yong Kim, about a new ecological plan for Africa and the economic outlook for 2016.
The World Bank has launched a new plan about Africa.
Yes.
The Africa Climate Business Plan. Can you explain us what is this plan?
Yeah, so this is what it is. We've called for in the next 4 years as much as $16 billion additional dollars to help Africa with this plan. There's all kinds of resilience that we need to build in. The African plans, understandably, are partly about mitigation and then largely about adaptation. So, for example, Africa is actively losing land. Land is deteriorating, is becoming desertified. So we're announcing our support for something called the Green Wall. Building literally a green wall to protect existing arable lands from becoming desertified. We need to be better at adaptation to extreme weather events, for example. Just simple things like early warning systems in the case of extreme weather could have a huge impact. And finally, we need more data. We need to really understand where we are in building the capacity to adapt to climate change in the form of more climate resilient agriculture, roads, for example, that can work even when there's flooding, cleaner, more livable cities. These are the kinds of things that we need to understand where we are and to use the data, use the knowledge that we have to help Africa take the next step. All those things are part of the plan. Also, we're going to increase our financing for renewable energy. The demand for renewable energy in Africa is very high, but sometimes the financing is not available. We need to find ways of providing very low-cost finance so that more investment can be made in renewable energy.
Why did you decide to focus specifically on Africa?
The worry that we had and the worry that the African countries had was that the climate change meeting and the climate change debate was going to be all about reducing the amount of carbon in the air for the benefit of the rich countries. And the poor countries were saying, what about us? We didn't put the carbon in the air, yet we're suffering the most. The boot of climate change is on our necks. That's how they say it. And so if that's the case, is there something that can happen out of these meetings that will be extremely positive for Africa? And we think there is. We think that we need to make a much bigger commitment to helping Africa adapt to climate change, and while at the same time moving it toward much cleaner sources of energy to fuel the growth and development of Africa. Africa has been growing very, very quickly, and the one thing that's limited its growth is access to energy. So we now need to find ways of meeting the need for energy, but in a cleaner way. That's not going to be easy. On the other hand, the technology is there, and we think we can make the financing available as well.
You're talking about $16 billion. How will you get this money?
Well, we're not just calling for the money. We're putting up a third of it ourselves. Out of the $16 billion, 5.7 will come from the World Bank Group. And what we're saying is that the countries have the plans. We're putting the first third of the money down. We think everyone else should step up and support the rest of the plan.
You're optimistic?
Absolutely.
And let's talk about global economy. What are your expectations for 2016?
Growth has disappointed once again. The advanced economy that seems to continue to do well is the United States. And of course, there have been loud signals that the U.S. Fed may increase its index rate in December. Also, we're seeing a huge exodus of capital from the emerging markets. And so the demand for our capital has increased tremendously. And we need to now fill in. As banks move out of emerging markets and of developing countries, we now have to step in, play our usual countercyclical role, and provide financing. Now, this is all happening in a difficult period, but we think that this is also an opportunity, especially in terms of rethinking how we invest in these developing countries. If we can now move toward cleaner energy, if we can now move toward the kinds of activities that will both develop the country and impact climate change, then I think we'd be in a great position. But all of our estimates for growth have been lowered just a little bit. And in emerging markets, Russia and Brazil are the countries of greatest concern right now.
What word would describe this economy? Fragile, or on the recovery path, or getting stronger?
We would just say disappointing, disappointing. And you know, the emerging market countries are in a very different position than they were in the late 1990s or the 1980s. You know, the central banks are independent. There's more fiscal space. There are more buffers in place. But still, we're expecting that the emerging markets that really drove global growth between 2008 and 2014 are going to grow slower this year. And as commodity prices will likely stay low for some time, we see that this slowdown is going to continue for at least the next year.
What advice would you give to leaders to be careful about in the coming month?
With the impending rise in the Fed rate, you know, every single leader has to think carefully about their plans for their budget and for the economy. So many countries are facing structural changes, you know, structural reforms that they've needed to make for a long time, improving the business environment, investing in education. There's all kinds of things that different countries have to do, and we've been saying for a long time, now's the time to do it. Now, you know, we're getting right to the point of a Fed rate increase. We're not sure what will happen. Developing countries now have to send very clear signals. Policy uncertainty coming out of developing countries is going to affect their borrowing costs, and is going to affect the movement of capital into or out of their country. So be clear on your policy intentions, undertake structural reforms where needed, build back the fiscal buffers wherever they can, and prepare for what could be more difficult conditions over the next year or so.
Mr. Kim, thank you.
Thank you.